The wooden chair felt cold beneath my body as I sat in the Chicago courtroom, hands folded neatly in my lap, watching my daughter Nicole play the part of the good submissive wife. I wanted to reach over and shake her, tell her to stop pretending, but we had a plan. We had to stick to it. Richard was seated opposite us at his lawyer's table, his expensive suit perfectly pressed, his smile wide and confident. He looked like he'd already won. Maybe he thought he had. "You'll never touch another cent of my money. Not for the rest of your life," he whispered to Nicole, just loud enough for his lawyer to hear. His voice carried that same tone he'd used for years when he told my daughter she couldn't go grocery shopping without asking him first, when he explained why she no longer needed her own credit card. He looked proud, like a hunter who just claimed the biggest prize of his life. Real quick before I tell you what happened next, subscribe if you haven't already. I want to know where you're watching from, especially if you've ever watched your own daughter be controlled and diminished by a man who promised to love her. If you've ever sat silently while your child was treated like property instead of a person. If you've worked your whole life to give your daughter independence, only to watch a husband take it all away. This is how a 4-year-old mother in Chicago, Illinois, helped her daughter escape a controlling marriage and exposed her son-in-law as a criminal who was laundering money for drug traffickers. It's about remembering who raised a strong, educated woman, who taught her daughter to stand up for herself, who refused to let a man destroy everything her child had worked for, and who spent 2 months gathering evidence that would change everything. Let me back up, give you the whole picture. Amber, Richard's mistress, was perched in the gallery behind him, her perfectly manicured fingers resting on her designer handbag. She leaned slightly forward, her red lips curving into a smile that turned my stomach. "That's right, babe," she mouthed softly, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. She called him babe, the same way Nicole used to, when she thought her marriage meant something, when she thought the man she married actually existed. Constance, Richard's mother, sat right next to Amber as if they were old friends planning a high society luncheon. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her cold blue eyes drilled into Nicole, as if my daughter were something dirty she had just stepped in. Constance had never liked Nicole. Not since the day Richard brought her home 8 years ago. My daughter wasn't good enough for her precious son, wasn't rich enough, didn't have enough class, wasn't worthy of the Whitmore name. "She doesn't deserve 1 dime, Constance declared, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. She smiled as she said it, the same smile she gave Nicole every Christmas when she handed my daughter a gift card to a department store while gifting Amber extravagant jewelry. Even before the affair, Constance had already been plotting Nicole's replacement. I sat there, 64 years old, watching these people try to destroy my child. I'd raised Nicole by myself after her father died when she was 10. I'd worked 2 jobs to put her through college. I'd taught her to be independent, to be strong, to never let anyone make her feel small. And then Richard Whitmore came along and systematically took all of that away. Mr. Roar, Nicole's lawyer, sat beside my daughter, shuffling papers. He looked nervous, like he knew we were about to lose everything. Richard's legal team consisted of 3 attorneys from the most expensive firm in downtown Chicago. They carried briefcases stuffed with documents, proving Nicole had never held a job during the marriage, had no qualifications, and deserved nothing more than a basic allowance. They painted my daughter as a gold digger who had trapped their poor, innocent client. Judge Wallace, a woman in her late 50s with a piercing gaze and salt and pepper hair, had been listening to their arguments all morning. She had a reputation for being tough but fair. She didn't smile much and didn't seem impressed by expensive suits or renowned lawyers, but even she appeared poised to rule in Richard's favor. "Your Honor," Richard's lead counsel said, rising with a thick binder in his hands, "my client has been more than generous. Mrs. Whitmore has no work history, no education beyond a bachelor's degree in marketing, and no assets of her own. She has lived a comfortable life for 8 years without contributing anything to the household income. A modest monthly stipend is more than equitable." I wanted to scream. No work history. Nicole had a degree in marketing and had been working at a successful agency when Richard convinced her to quit. She'd managed his entire social calendar, organized his business dinners, handled all the household administration that kept his life running smoothly. No assets. That was because every time Nicole tried to save money or open her own account, Richard found a reason why she couldn't. But Nicole sat silently, playing the role everyone expected. the weak, helpless wife who didn't understand money, business, or how the real world worked. I'd watched her play that part for 8 years, getting smaller and smaller, until the day she finally called me crying, telling me about the affair, about the financial control, about how trapped she felt. That's when we started planning. Richard turned to look at Nicole, his dark eyes brimming with satisfaction. He thought he had completely crushed her. For the past 6 months, since Nicole discovered his cheating, he had been preparing for this moment. He had moved money, concealed assets, and made sure everything appeared to belong only to him. He thought Nicole was too stupid to notice, too scared to fight back. He had no idea that his wife had been calling me every night, that we'd been documenting everything, that we'd made some very interesting phone calls to federal investigators. Mr. Rohr slowly stood up, looking like he was walking to his own execution. But I knew better. I'd rehearsed this moment with him a dozen times. Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence to submit on behalf of my client, Mrs. Whitmore has prepared a letter for this court's consideration. His voice shook slightly as he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single white envelope. The envelope I'd helped Nicole write over countless late-night phone calls and secret meetings at my house. Richard's lawyer looked confused. They hadn't been informed of any letter. Richard frowned, his confident smile fading. Amber shifted in her seat, her perfect posture becoming slightly less perfect. Constance's cold eyes narrowed. Judge Wallace took the envelope and carefully opened it. The courtroom was so silent I could hear the rustle of the paper as she unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved across the page, reading in silence. At first her expression didn't change. Then slowly her eyebrows began to rise. She read for what felt like an eternity. Richard's lawyers began whispering among themselves. Richard himself stared at Nicole, trying to guess what on earth she could have written that held any significance. He still looked sure of himself, but now there was something else in his eyes. Something that might have been worry. I knew what was in that letter. I'd helped Nicole write every word. I'd sat with her at my kitchen table in my Southside apartment while she cried and told me everything. About the money Richard was moving. About the suspicious cash deposits. About the conversations she'd overheard. About the men who came to their house late at night. My daughter wasn't stupid. Richard had spent 8 years trying to make her believe she was, but I'd raised her better than that. When she finally started paying attention, really paying attention, she saw things he never imagined she'd notice. Judge Wallace finished reading and looked up at everyone gathered before her. Then something astonishing happened. She began to laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but a deep, genuine belly laugh that bounced off the courtroom walls. She laughed so hard she had to put the letter down and remove her glasses to wipe her eyes. "Oh, this is good," she said quietly, but her voice carried clearly in the silent room. "This is very, very good." I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Finally, after 6 months of planning, after 2 months of secret meetings with federal investigators, after countless nights helping Nicole document everything, it was time for them to know the truth. The confident smiles vanished from their faces, as if someone had flipped a switch. Richard's face turned pale. Amber's mouth fell slightly open. Constance's icy composure cracked, and for the first time in 8 years, she looked genuinely afraid. Richard's lead counsel stood up. "Your Honor, we object to the introduction of evidence that wasn't disclosed during discovery." "Sit down, counselor," Judge Wallace said, still smiling. "You'll want to hear this." She looked directly at Richard and I saw him shrink slightly in his chair. Good. Let him feel small for once. Let him feel the way he'd made my daughter feel for years. "Mr. Whitmore, according to this letter, your wife has been cooperating with investigators from the FBI White-Collar Crimes Unit for the past 2 months. She has provided exhaustive evidence of your money laundering operation, including recordings, photographs, and financial documents." The courtroom erupted. Richard jumped to his feet. "That's impossible. She doesn't know anything about my business." "Sit down, Mr. Whitmore," Judge Wallace said sharply. "According to Detective Major of the White-Collar Crimes Unit, you have been laundering money for a drug trafficking organization. You have been skimming funds from your criminal partners and using that money to finance an extramarital relationship." I watched the color drain from Amber's face. She gasped, bringing her hand to her throat. "Richard, what is she talking about? The jewelry, the trips, the expensive dinners?" The judge continued reading from Nicole's letter. all paid for with stolen drug money. Miss Sterling, perhaps you should contact an attorney. Accepting gifts purchased with the proceeds of criminal activity can make you an accessory to money laundering." Amber's face went white. She looked at Richard in horror, realizing that everything he had given her was evidence of serious felonies. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I had no idea." "Oh, but you knew enough," I thought. "You knew he was married. You knew you were helping him humiliate my daughter. Now you can deal with the consequences." Constance stood up, her voice trembling with rage. "This is ridiculous. My son is a respected businessman." "Mrs. Whitmore," the judge said, looking at Constance with distaste, "your son is facing charges for money laundering, tax evasion, and organized crime. The state is going to seize all assets purchased with illegal funds, which appears to include the family home, the vehicles, and the majority of his company shares." I watched Constance's face crumble. The family home. The Whitmore estate she was so proud of. The house she'd used as leverage to make Nicole feel inferior. All of it about to be taken away. Richard's lawyer was whispering frantically in his ear, but Richard swatted him away. He turned to Nicole, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "Nicole, you have no idea what you've done. Those people don't forgive betrayal. You've put yourself in danger." Before Nicole could respond, I stood up. All eyes turned to me. I didn't care. I'd been silent long enough. "My daughter knows exactly what she's done, Richard. She's done what I taught her to do. She's stood up for herself. She's protected herself from a criminal who was using their marriage as a cover." "Mrs. Ferguson," Richard's lawyer started, "you need to sit down." "No," I said firmly. "I've sat down and been quiet for 8 years while you people tried to convince my daughter she was worthless. While your client isolated her from her friends. While he controlled every dollar she spent. While your precious Constance treated her like trash. I'm done being quiet." Judge Wallace looked at me with something like approval. "Mrs. Ferguson, while I appreciate your support for your daughter, please let me handle the proceedings." I nodded and sat down, but I kept my eyes on Richard. Let him see the woman who'd raised the daughter he'd underestimated. "Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Wallace said, addressing Nicole directly. "As a collaborating witness in an official investigation, you are entitled to protection and compensation. The district attorney's office has agreed to allow you to retain all assets that can be proven to have been purchased with legitimate income from Mr. Whitmore's real estate business." "How much is that?" Richard asked desperately. "According to the financial analysis, approximately 40% of his assets came from legitimate business income. Mrs. Whitmore will receive those assets, plus a compensatory payment, plus a reward from the state for her cooperation in this investigation." I watched Richard sink into his chair, the reality finally hitting him. He had lost everything. His business, his money, his freedom, and his future with Amber. All because he had assumed his wife was too weak and too stupid to fight back. All because he'd never considered that Nicole had a mother who'd taught her to be strong, who'd reminded her who she really was, who'd helped her find her way back to herself. Amber was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as she realized her dreams of wealth and status were crumbling. Constance sat in stunned silence, watching her family's reputation being destroyed in a matter of minutes. Furthermore, Judge Wallace continued, "Officers from the Chicago Police Department Major Case Squad are waiting outside this courtroom to arrest Mr. Whitmore on charges of money laundering, criminal organization, and tax fraud. This divorce proceeding is hereby suspended pending the outcome of the criminal charges." The courtroom doors opened, and Detective Major entered with 2 other officers. He was a tall black man in his 40s with a no-nonsense expression. He'd been the one Nicole and I had met with secretly over the past 2 months, the one who'd listened to everything my daughter had to say and taken her seriously when she thought no one would. Richard looked at Nicole one last time, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You have no idea what you've done, Nicole." Nicole stood up slowly, and I saw my daughter really saw her for the first time in years. Her back was straight, her chin was up. She looked like the woman I'd raised before Richard had spent 8 years trying to break her down. "I know exactly what I've done," she said calmly. "I took back my life." As the officers handcuffed Richard and read him his rights, I felt tears sting my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of pride. My daughter had found her strength again. She'd found her way back. Amber bolted from the room, probably already calling lawyers to distance herself from Richard's criminal activities. Constance followed her slowly, looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. The two women who had planned to celebrate Nicole's destruction were now facing their own ruin. Mr. Rohr turned to Nicole and me, his nervous expression replaced with genuine relief. "That went better than I expected." "You did well," I told him. "Thank you for trusting us." Nicole hugged me tightly, and I held my daughter, feeling the tension drain from her body. "It's over, baby," I whispered. "It's really over." "Not yet," she said quietly. "We still have to get through the trial." Detective Major said Richard's partners might try to intimidate me. "Let them try," I said firmly. "You're not alone anymore. You've got the FBI, the police, and you've got me." We left the courtroom together, mother and daughter, walking past the reporters who'd gotten wind of something dramatic happening. Camera flashes went off. Voices shouted questions. But we kept walking, heads high. It had been 3 years since I first noticed something was wrong with Nicole. She'd always called me at least 3 times a week, but the calls had become less frequent. When we did talk, she seemed distant, careful about what she said. I'd driven from my apartment on the south side to their house in Lincoln Park one Saturday afternoon unannounced. Richard had answered the door, surprise flickering across his face before he plastered on a smile. "Teresa, what a surprise! Nicole's not feeling well. Maybe you should call first next time." But I'd heard Nicole's voice from upstairs. "Mom, is that Mom?" She'd come down the stairs looking thinner than I remembered, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. Her hair, usually so carefully styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Baby, are you okay?" I'd asked. "I'm fine, Mom, just a stomach bug." But her eyes told a different story. Richard had hovered the entire visit, interrupting our conversation, answering for Nicole when I asked her questions. When I suggested we go for coffee, just the two of us, he'd said Nicole really needed to rest. I'd left that day with a sick feeling in my stomach. Something was very wrong. Over the next few months, I'd paid closer attention, the way Richard spoke over Nicole in conversations, the way he made decisions without consulting her, the way Constance treated my daughter like hired help rather than family. I'd started calling more often, texting more frequently. Nicole's responses were always brief, always careful, always with the sense that someone was watching. Then came the day Nicole called me from a Target parking lot, her voice shaking. She'd gone to buy groceries with the credit card Richard had given her, and it had been declined. When she'd called him, he'd berated her for being irresponsible with money, for spending too much. "Mom, I only bought essentials, bread, milk, eggs. The bill was $42. "Why would he decline the card for $42? "Because he's controlling you, baby," I'd said. "He's making sure you know he has all the power." That's when she'd started telling me everything. The years of financial control, the isolation from friends, the constant criticism. The affair she'd discovered 6 months earlier, the one Richard didn't know she knew about. I found receipts, Mom, jewelry, expensive dinners, hotel rooms, all charged to credit cards I didn't know existed. And I found bank statements. There's money moving in and out of accounts that don't make sense. Large cash deposits, transfers to offshore accounts. "Nicole, that sounds like money laundering." "I know, I Googled it. I've been documenting everything for months, but I don't know what to do with the information." That's when I'd told her about my friend Dorothy's nephew, who worked for the FBI. Dorothy and I had worked together at the hospital for 20 years before we both retired. Her nephew, Detective Major, specialized in white-collar crime. "Let me make a call," I'd said. The first meeting had been at my apartment. Detective Major had listened while Nicole laid out everything she'd discovered. Bank statements, receipts, photographs of suspicious documents, recordings of phone conversations Richard had in his home office, thinking Nicole was asleep upstairs. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is enough to open an investigation," Detective Major had said. "But I need to be clear. This will likely lead to criminal charges. Your husband could go to prison. Your marriage will definitely end. Are you prepared for that?" Nicole had looked at me and I'd taken her hand. "Baby, you've got to decide. But I'll support you either way." "I'm prepared," Nicole had said. "I can't live like this anymore." For the next 2 months, Nicole had worked with Detective Major and his team. She'd worn a wire during Richard's phone calls. She'd photographed documents when Richard was at the gym. She'd memorized account numbers and recorded conversations with the suspicious men who visited their house. It was dangerous work. I'd barely slept during those 2 months, terrified that Richard would discover what Nicole was doing, but my daughter was careful. She'd learned over 8 years how to move through that house without drawing attention, how to become invisible when she needed to be. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Richard had spent years teaching Nicole to be quiet and unnoticed. Now, she was using those very skills against him. "Mom, I found something," Nicole had called me one night, her voice shaking. "Richard has a ledger. It's hidden in his office safe, but I figured out the combination. It's all there. Every transaction. Every payment. Names, dates, amounts. This is what the FBI needs. Can you photograph it?" I already did. I have hundreds of photos on a burner phone. Detective Major is going to be very happy. She'd been right. The ledger was the final piece of evidence the FBI needed. It documented 5 years of money laundering, showing exactly how Richard moved drug money through his real estate business, skimmed profits from his criminal partners, and used the stolen money to fund his lifestyle. The affair with Amber wasn't just about sex. It was about Richard creating a whole second life with money he'd stolen from dangerous people. He'd bought Amber a condo in River North. He'd taken her on trips to Europe. He'd showered her with jewelry that cost more than I'd made in a year working as a nurse, all with money that belonged to drug traffickers who didn't take kindly to theft. "Your daughter's testimony will be crucial," Detective Major had told me during one of our meetings. "But Mrs. Ferguson, I need you to understand something. When this goes public, Richard's partners are going to be furious. They're going to want revenge. We can offer protection, but there's always risk. My daughter has been living in a prison for 8 years, I'd said. I'll take the risk of physical danger over the certainty of her slow destruction any day." Now, sitting in my apartment the night after the courtroom drama, I watched Nicole sleep on my couch. She'd barely made it through the door before exhaustion hit her. The past 6 months of stress, fear, and pretending had finally caught up with her. I covered her with a blanket, the same one I'd used to cover her when she was a little girl having nightmares. Except this time she'd faced the nightmare and won. My phone buzzed. "Detective Major." "Mrs. Ferguson, I wanted to update you. Richard Whitmore has been formally charged. He's being held without bail because he's considered a flight risk. His assets are being frozen, pending the outcome of the investigation." "What about his partners, the drug traffickers? We've been monitoring them. They're aware Richard's been arrested, but they don't know yet that he stole from them. When they find out, they're going to be more focused on getting their money back than on revenge. Still, I've arranged for protection for both you and Nicole. Officers will be stationed outside your apartment and her new residence." New residence. Nicole can't go back to the house in Lincoln Park. It's a crime scene now, and frankly, it's not safe. We'll help her relocate. After I hung up, I looked around my small 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much. The furniture was old, the carpet was worn, and the neighborhood wasn't fancy. But it was safe. It was mine. And right now, it was Nicole's sanctuary. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Mrs. Ferguson, this is Constance Whitmore." Her voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk about Nicole." "I don't think we have anything to discuss. My son is not a criminal. Your daughter has fabricated these charges because she wants money. She's always been after the Whitmore fortune." I laughed, actually laughed. Constance, Nicole has a bachelor's degree and work experience. She was making her own money before Richard convinced her to quit her job. She didn't need your fortune. What she needed was a husband who treated her like a human being instead of property. Richard gave her everything. A beautiful home, financial security, social status. He gave her a prison, I interrupted. He controlled every dollar she spent. He isolated her from her friends. He cheated on her and flaunted his mistress in front of her. And now we know he was using drug money to finance his affair. Your son is exactly the criminal the FBI says he is. You've poisoned her against our family. You've always resented that Nicole married above her station. Above her station, my voice rose. I raised a strong, intelligent woman with a college degree and a career. Your son systematically destroyed her confidence and independence. And you helped him do it. Every snide comment, every comparison to Amber, every time you treated my daughter like she wasn't good enough, you were helping him break her down. "We'll fight this," Constance said coldly. "Richard has the best lawyers in Chicago. This will never go to trial. It's already going to trial. The FBI has evidence. Recordings, photographs, financial documents, and a ledger in your son's own handwriting. Nicole gave them everything they needed. Silence on the other end. Then she had no right to go through Richard's private documents. She had every right. She was his wife. And more importantly, she was a citizen witnessing criminal activity. She did the right thing even though it was terrifying. You've ruined my son's life. No, Constance, your son ruined his own life. He chose to commit crimes. He chose to launder money for drug traffickers. He chose to steal from dangerous people. He chose to treat my daughter like garbage. Those were his choices. Nicole just decided she didn't have to live with the consequences of his choices anymore. Constance hung up. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a mixture of anger and satisfaction. For 8 years that woman had made Nicole feel small. Now her precious son was in jail, her family estate was being seized, and her reputation was destroyed. I didn't feel guilty about it. Not even a little bit. Nicole stirred on the couch, opening her eyes. Mom, who was that, Constance? She called to tell me this is all our fault. Nicole sat up slowly, running her hands through her hair. Of course she did. She'll never accept that Richard is responsible for his own actions. How are you feeling, baby? Scared? Relieved? Free? She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Mom, thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. I sat down next to her on the couch and pulled her into a hug. You did this, Nicole. You found the strength. You gathered the evidence. You made the choice to save yourself. I just reminded you of who you've always been. I forgot who I was, she whispered. He made me forget. I know, baby, but you remembered. That's what matters. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Nicole said I need to go back to the house. There are things I need to get. Clothes, personal items, some photos from before everything went wrong. Detective Major said the house is a crime scene. I know, but he said I could go with a police escort. I want to go tomorrow. Will you come with me? Of course. The next morning we drove to Lincoln Park with a police escort. The house looked the same from outside. The perfectly manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway, well, Richard's expensive cars that were now being seized by the federal government. Crime scene tape stretched across the front door. An officer removed it to let us in. Inside the house felt different, empty somehow, even though all the furniture was still there. The expensive artwork on the walls, the designer furniture, the crystal chandelier in the foyer, all of it seemed hollow now, like a beautiful shell with nothing inside. Nicole walked through the rooms, slowly gathering items. A photo album from her college days. Some clothes from her closet. A jewelry box that had belonged to her grandmother, my mother. I wandered into Richard's home office. This was where Nicole had found the ledger, where she'd recorded his phone calls, where so much of the evidence had come from. The safe was open, now emptied by the FBI. Richard's desk drawers had been searched, documents removed. His computer was gone, seized as evidence. On a shelf I noticed a framed photo. Richard and Nicole on their wedding day 8 years ago. Nicole looked so happy, so full of hope. Richard looked proud, possessive even then. I'd had reservations about the marriage from the beginning, not because Richard wasn't successful or came from a wealthy family, but because of the way he looked at Nicole, like she was something he'd acquired, a prize he'd won. I'd pushed those feelings aside, told myself I was being overprotective. Nicole was 24, an adult capable of making her own decisions. Who was I to interfere? But I should have trusted my instincts. I should have said something. Mom, Nicole's voice came from upstairs. Can you help me with something? I found her in the bedroom, standing in front of the closet. I want to take some of my clothes, but most of them are things Richard bought for me, things he told me to wear. I don't even know what I actually like anymore. I understood what she was saying. Richard had controlled everything, even her wardrobe. Nothing too bright, nothing too casual, nothing that drew too much attention. Everything had to be appropriate for a Whitmore wife. Take only what you actually want, I said. Leave the rest. Start fresh. Nicole pulled out a few items. A comfortable sweater. Some jeans Richard had hated. A dress she'd worn to my birthday party 2 years ago, before Richard had convinced her to stop attending family gatherings. This is all I want from here, she said. The rest can stay. As we were leaving, Constance's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. She got out looking older than I'd seen her yesterday. The veneer of perfection was cracking. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "This is still my son's house." Actually, the police officer said this property is being seized by the federal government as part of the criminal investigation. Mrs. Whitmore has permission to retrieve personal belongings. You do not. This is my family's estate, Constance said, her voice rising. My husband built this house 30 years ago. My son grew up here. You can't just take it. The house was purchased with laundered money, the officer explained. According to the financial records, your son used illegal proceeds to buy out his siblings and refinance the property. That makes it subject to civil asset forfeiture. Constance's face went white. She looked at Nicole. You did this. You took everything from us. No, Nicole said, her voice steady. Richard did this. He committed crimes. He laundered drug money. He put this entire family at risk. I just made sure the truth came out. You could have come to me. We could have handled this privately as a family. You were never my family, Constance. You made that clear from the day we met. And even if you had been, this isn't something you handle privately. This is organized crime. This is drug trafficking. People who commit those crimes need to face justice. Justice. Constance laughed bitterly. This is revenge. You're angry about the affair, so you've destroyed my son's life. The affair just opened my eyes, Nicole said. It made me start paying attention. And when I did, I saw what Richard really was. A criminal who was using our marriage as a cover. He gave you everything. He gave me a cage, Nicole said firmly. And the key to that cage was making me believe I was nothing without him. But my mother raised me to be more than Richard Whitmore's wife. It just took me 8 years to remember that. Constance looked at me with pure hatred. You did this. You turned her against us. I reminded her who she was, I said. I reminded her that she's a college-educated woman who doesn't need a man to define her worth. I reminded her that financial abuse is still abuse. And I helped her find the courage to stand up to a criminal, even when that criminal was her husband. We'll fight this, Constance said. Richard will be exonerated. And when he is, Nicole will get nothing. Not a penny. Mrs. Whitmore, the police officer interrupted, you need to leave this property, now. As Constance got back in her Mercedes and drove away, Nicole turned to me. Do you think Richard will be exonerated? Not a chance, I said. The evidence is overwhelming. The FBI has his ledger, his financial records, recordings of his conversations. He's going to prison, baby. It's just a matter of how long. We finished loading Nicole's belongings into my car and drove back to my apartment. On the way, Nicole was quiet, staring out the window at the Chicago streets passing by. What are you thinking about? I asked. I'm thinking about how I'm 32 years old and I have to start my whole life over. No job, no home, no husband. I feel like I'm back where I was at 24, except now I'm damaged. You're not damaged, I said firmly. You're educated. You're experienced. You survived 8 years of financial and emotional abuse, and you came out strong enough to take down a criminal organization. That's not damaged, baby. That's resilient. I'm scared, Mom. I know. But you're not alone. You've got me. You've got FBI protection. And you've got yourself back. That's more than you had yesterday. Over the next few weeks, our lives settled into a new routine. Nicole slept on the pull-out couch in my living room. During the day, she met with prosecutors, reviewed evidence, and prepared for Richard's trial. At night, we cooked dinner together and watched old movies just like we used to when she was a teenager. Detective Major called regularly with updates. Richard's criminal partners had been arrested in a coordinated raid. The drug trafficking organization was being dismantled. Richard, realizing the mountain of evidence against him, was considering a plea deal. If he takes the plea, he's looking at 12 to 15 years in federal prison, Detective Major explained during one of his visits to my apartment. If he goes to trial and loses, he could get 25 to 30 years. What do you think he'll do? Nicole asked. His lawyers are smart. They'll convince him to take the deal. But Nicole, you need to understand something. Even with a plea deal, you'll have to testify. You'll have to face him in court and explain how you gathered the evidence. His lawyers will try to discredit you, make you look like a vengeful ex-wife. Are you prepared for that? Nicole looked at me and I squeezed her hand. I'm prepared, she said. I've lived through worse. 6 weeks after the courtroom revelation, Richard's lawyers reached out to negotiate. They wanted to meet with Nicole and her legal team to discuss the terms of Richard's cooperation. Mr. Rohr called to explain. They want Richard to plead guilty to money laundering and tax evasion in exchange for a reduced sentence. But they need assurances that you won't pursue additional civil litigation against Richard or the Whitmore estate. What does that mean? Nicole asked. It means they want you to agree not to sue for damages beyond what's already been awarded in the divorce settlement. In exchange, Richard will cooperate fully with the investigation, testify against his criminal partners, and accept a 12-year sentence. And if I don't agree, then it goes to trial, which could take years. Richard might get a longer sentence, but you'll have to testify repeatedly. You'll be cross-examined. Your entire marriage will be dissected in public. It will be exhausting and traumatic. Nicole was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'll agree. I don't want his money. I just want to be free of him. The plea hearing was scheduled for a cold Tuesday morning in November. Nicole wore a simple navy suit I'd helped her pick out. She looked professional, composed, strong. Richard was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, looking nothing like the confident man who'd sat in that courtroom weeks ago. He'd lost weight, his expensive haircut had grown out. He looked tired and defeated. When his eyes met Nicole's, I saw something flicker across his face. Regret, anger, I couldn't tell. But Nicole held his gaze steadily, unflinching. Judge Wallace presided over the hearing. She'd made it clear she wanted to see this case through to the end. Mr. Whitmore, you're entering a guilty plea to charges of money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit organized crime. Do you understand these charges? Yes, Your Honor, Richard said quietly. And you understand that by pleading guilty, you're waiving your right to a trial? Yes, Your Honor. You understand that you're facing a sentence of 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 10 years? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Wallace turned to the prosecutor. Does the state accept this plea? We do, Your Honor. Mr. Whitmore has agreed to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into the drug trafficking organization he worked with. His testimony will be crucial in prosecuting the remaining members of that organization, Mrs. Whitmore, Judge Wallace said, looking at Nicole. This plea agreement requires your consent regarding the civil matters. Have you reviewed the terms? I have, Your Honor. And you agree to accept the divorce settlement as negotiated with no additional civil litigation? I do, Your Honor. Very well. Judge Wallace looked at Richard with an expression of distaste. Mr. Whitmore, you are an educated man from a privileged background. You had every advantage in life. And you chose to use those advantages to commit serious crimes. You chose to launder money for drug traffickers. You chose to steal from dangerous criminals. And you chose to financially and emotionally abuse your wife for 8 years? Richard kept his eyes down, saying nothing. I want to be clear about something, the judge continued. The only reason you're receiving a reduced sentence is because your wife had the courage to gather evidence against you. She risked her safety to expose your crimes. She cooperated with federal investigators despite the danger. If it weren't for her bravery, you would still be committing these crimes. Judge Wallace looked at Nicole. Mrs. Whitmore, I've been a judge for 20 years. I've seen many victims of domestic abuse. Most never find the strength to fight back. You did. You not only freed yourself, but you helped bring down an entire criminal organization. That took remarkable courage. Nicole's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Your Honor. This court accepts the defendant's guilty plea. Mr. Whitmore, you are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The divorce decree is finalized. Mrs. Whitmore is awarded 40% of all legitimate assets, plus compensatory damages, plus the witness cooperation reward, totaling $75,000. All remaining assets will be liquidated to pay restitution to the victims of your crimes. The bailiff came forward to take Richard away. As he stood, he turned to Nicole one more time. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry. Nicole didn't respond. She just watched as he was led out of the courtroom, out of her life forever. Outside, reporters were waiting. Camera flashes went off. Voices shouted questions. But Nicole walked right past them, head high, with me at her side. We drove back to my apartment in silence. When we got inside, Nicole finally broke down. All the emotions she'd been holding in for months came pouring out. Anger, grief, relief, fear, all of it. I held her while she cried the way I'd held her when she was a little girl. "It's okay, baby. Let it out. You did it. It's over. I wasted 8 years of my life," she sobbed. 8 years with a man who was using me, who never loved me, who was a criminal. "You didn't waste anything," I said firmly. "You learned, you survived, you fought back. Those 8 years made you stronger even though it shouldn't have been necessary. And now you're free. You're 32 years old with your whole life ahead of you. I don't even know who I am anymore. Then we'll figure it out together, just like we always have." The witness cooperation reward of $75,000 came through 3 weeks after the plea hearing. Combined with the 40% of Richard's legitimate assets, Nicole had enough money to start over properly. "I want to get my own place," she told me one evening as we sat at my kitchen table. "You've been amazing, Mom, letting me stay here. But I need my own space. I need to figure out who I am without Richard, and I can't do that living on your couch. I understand, baby. Where are you thinking? Not Lincoln Park. Not anywhere near the Whitmore estate. Maybe Andersonville or Rogers Park. Somewhere quiet away from all the memories." We spent the next few weekends looking at apartments. Nicole settled on a modest 1-bedroom in Rogers Park close to the lake. It wasn't fancy, but it had good light and a small balcony where she could sit and watch the water. Moving day was bittersweet. I was proud of Nicole for taking this step, but I'd gotten used to having her around. My apartment felt empty after she left. "I'm only 20 minutes away, Mom," she said, hugging me tight. "And I'll call you every day. I promise." She kept that promise. Every evening my phone would ring and we'd talk about her day, about the job interviews she was going to, about the therapy sessions that were helping her process 8 years of abuse, about the small victories like cooking a meal just for herself or buying clothes she actually liked. "I went to a marketing firm today," she told me one night, her voice excited in a way I hadn't heard in years. "They're looking for someone to manage social media accounts for small businesses. It's entry level, but Mom, they were impressed with my degree and my old portfolio. I have a second interview next week." "That's wonderful, baby." The interviewer asked why I had an 8-year gap in my resume. I told her the truth. That I'd been married to someone who convinced me I didn't need to work. She got this look on her face like she understood. She said she'd been in a similar situation once. She said women who get out of controlling relationships are some of the strongest employees she's ever hired because we know what we're capable of surviving. Nicole got the job. Within 6 months, she was thriving. Her boss gave her more responsibility. Her clients loved her work. She was making her own money, building her own career, creating her own life. "I forgot how good this feels," she told me during one of our weekly dinners at my apartment. "Being productive. Being valued for my skills. Making my own money. You were always meant for this," I said. "Richard tried to take it away, but he couldn't destroy who you really are." One evening about 8 months after Richard's sentencing, Nicole called me sounding upset. "Amber contacted me today. Through Facebook. She wants to meet." "What? Why?" "She says she needs to apologize. She says she didn't know about the money laundering, didn't know Richard was married when they first met, didn't know anything. She says she's in therapy dealing with the trauma of being involved with a criminal." "What did you tell her?" I didn't respond. "But Mom, part of me is curious. Part of me wants to hear what she has to say. Do you think that's wise? I don't know. My therapist says it might give me closure, but I'm afraid I'll just get angry. Or worse, I'll feel sorry for her." "Nicole, that woman knew you existed. Maybe she didn't know about the money laundering, but she knew Richard was married. She sat in that courtroom smiling while you were being humiliated. She doesn't deserve your forgiveness or your pity." "I know. You're right. I keep wondering what Richard told her about me. What lies he fed her to justify the affair. It doesn't matter what he told her. She chose to believe him. She chose to be the other woman. That's on her." Nicole was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to block her. I don't need closure from Amber. I need to move forward. That's my girl." A year after Richard's sentencing, Nicole called me with news. "Mom, I met someone. My first instinct was fear. After everything she'd been through, was she ready? But I kept my voice calm. Tell me about him. His name is James. He's a teacher at a high school in Evanston. We met at a community center volunteer event. He's kind, Mom. Really kind. And he listens when I talk. And when I told him about Richard, about the abuse and the trial, he didn't run away. He just said he was sorry I'd gone through that and asked if there was anything he could do to make me feel safe. He sounds good, baby. But take it slow, okay? You're still healing. I know. My therapist said the same thing. We're just friends right now. Coffee dates, walks by the lake. Nothing serious. But Mom, it feels nice to have someone in my life who treats me like an actual person instead of property. I met James a few weeks later when Nicole brought him to Sunday dinner at my apartment. He was younger than Richard, maybe 35, with kind eyes and an easy smile. He complimented my cooking, asked about my years as a nurse, and treated Nicole with a gentleness that made my heart ache for all the years she'd gone without it. After dinner, while Nicole was in the bathroom, James said to me, "Mrs. Ferguson, I want you to know I understand what Nicole's been through. I understand she needs time and space. I'm not trying to rush anything. I really care about her. And I'll never do anything to make her feel controlled or trapped. You hurt my daughter and you'll answer to me," I said, only half joking. "I would expect nothing less," he said seriously. "She's lucky to have a mother who fought for her the way you did." 18 months after Richard's sentencing, Detective Major called with an update. Richard's been cooperating fully with the investigation. His testimony helped us take down the rest of the organization. "But Mrs. Ferguson, I need to tell you something. Some of Richard's former partners were sentenced last week. One of them made threats against Nicole in court. We don't think he'll follow through. He's going to prison for 20 years, but I wanted you to be aware. Should Nicole be worried, we're keeping an eye on the situation." The threat was vague, more bluster than anything real, but I've arranged for increased patrols near her apartment just to be safe. I didn't tell Nicole about the threat immediately. She was doing so well, building her new life, healing. But that evening I drove to her apartment in Rogers Park. "Mom, is everything okay?" she asked when she opened the door. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to see you." We sat on her balcony watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. Nicole, Detective Major called. "One of Richard's old partners made some threats. It's probably nothing, but there will be extra police patrols around here for a while." Nicole was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm not going to live in fear anymore, Mom. I spent 8 years being afraid of Richard's anger, afraid of his control. If some criminal wants to threaten me, let him. I did the right thing. I'd do it again. That's my girl," I said, pride swelling in my chest. "That's the daughter I raised." 2 years after Richard's sentencing, life had settled into something that felt almost normal. Nicole had been promoted to senior social media manager at her firm. She and James were still together, taking things slow but steady. She'd moved into a bigger apartment in the same neighborhood, one with 2 bedrooms, so I could stay over when I visited. I'd started volunteering at a women's shelter on the South Side, helping women who were leaving abusive relationships. Nicole's story, our story, had taught me how important it was to have someone in your corner when you're trying to escape. "You remind me of my own mother," one woman told me during a counseling session. "She never gave up on me either, even when I kept going back to him." "That's what mothers do," I said. "We hold the light when our children can't see in the dark." One Saturday afternoon, Nicole called me sounding nervous. "Mom, can you come over? James and I need to talk to you about something." My heart jumped. Was something wrong? Had James hurt her? Was she okay? I drove to Rogers Park faster than I probably should have. When I got to Nicole's apartment, both she and James were sitting on the couch, holding hands, looking anxious. "What's wrong?" I asked immediately. "Nothing's wrong," Nicole said, a smile breaking across her face. "Mom, James proposed. We're getting married." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by joy. "Oh, baby, congratulations." I hugged them both, tears streaming down my face. "Mrs. Ferguson," James said, "I wanted to ask your permission before I proposed, but Nicole said that was old-fashioned and unnecessary. But I want you to know that I love your daughter. I promise to treat her with respect, to support her independence, and to never make her feel small or controlled." "You better," I said, half laughing, half crying. "Because if you don't, you'll have me to answer to." "I'm counting on it," he said seriously. "Nicole needs people in her life who will protect her. I want to be one of those people, not someone she needs protection from." The wedding was small, held in a botanical garden in the spring. Just close friends and family. Dorothy from the hospital came, and Detective Major, who'd become a friend over the years. Mr. Rohr attended, proud to see Nicole thriving. Constance wasn't invited. Neither was anyone from the Whitmore family. Nicole had made peace with closing that door permanently. As I watched Nicole and James exchange vows, I thought about how far she'd come. From that broken woman sleeping on my couch to this confident, radiant bride who'd rebuilt her entire life. "You look beautiful, baby," I told her before she walked down the aisle. "Your father would be so proud, and so am I. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mom. You saved my life." "No," I said firmly. "You saved your own life. I just reminded you how." 3 years after Richard's sentencing, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Richard, postmarked from the federal prison in Indiana where he was serving his sentence. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mrs. Ferguson," it began. "I know I have no right to contact you or Nicole. I know I caused unimaginable pain to your daughter and to you. I'm writing not to ask for forgiveness, but to say that I understand now what I did. In prison, I've had a lot of time to think about the man I became. The therapy here has helped me see how I used control and manipulation to feel powerful. How I saw Nicole as a possession rather than a person. How I destroyed something beautiful because I was broken inside. Nicole deserves every good thing in her life. I hope she's found happiness. I hope she's rebuilt what I tried to tear down. And I hope you can take some comfort in knowing that you raised a daughter strong enough to survive me and come out the other side. I'm truly sorry for everything. Richard." I read the letter twice. Then I put it in a drawer. I didn't show it to Nicole. She was happy now, married, thriving. She didn't need Richard's apology or his regret. She'd moved on. But I kept the letter just in case she ever wanted to see it. Just in case she ever needed proof that he finally understood what he'd done. 4 years after the courtroom drama, Nicole called me with news that made my heart soar. "Mom, I'm pregnant." "Oh, baby, that's wonderful. I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I'm not a good mother? What if I'm damaged from everything with Richard? What if I can't give this child what they need?" "Nicole," I said firmly, "you are going to be an amazing mother. You know what abuse looks like, so you'll never let it happen to your child. You know what real love is because I showed you and because James shows you every day. You're not damaged. You're strong. You're resilient. And this child is lucky to have you." 9 months later, I held my granddaughter for the first time. Sophia, named after my mother. She had Nicole's eyes and James's smile, and when she wrapped her tiny fingers around mine, I felt a completeness I hadn't known was missing. "Look at her, Mom," Nicole whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect. Just like her mother," I said. 5 years after that day in the courtroom, I sat in Nicole's living room watching my granddaughter Sophia play with blocks on the floor. She was 18 months old now, full of energy and curiosity, always exploring, always learning. Nicole came in from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of tea. She'd taken the afternoon off from work to spend time with Sophia and me. James was at the school teaching his classes. "Mom, I've been thinking about something," Nicole said, settling onto the couch beside me. "I want to start speaking publicly about what happened, about financial abuse, about domestic control, about how I got out. Are you sure you're ready for that?" "I think so. My therapist thinks it might be helpful not just for other women, but for me too. And Mom, there are so many women out there going through what I went through. Women who think they're trapped, who think they can't fight back. I want them to know they can." "What would you do?" "Speak at shelters, that, and maybe write about it. I've been working on a blog. Just sharing my story, the warning signs I missed, the ways Richard controlled me. It's been therapeutic. And I've gotten messages from women saying it helped them recognize their own situations. Pride swelled in my chest. My daughter using her pain to help others. I think that's beautiful, baby. But are you prepared for the backlash? People can be cruel online. I know. But I'm not that scared woman anymore. Richard took 8 years of my life, but he didn't take who I am. And if my story helps even one woman get out, it's worth it. Over the next few months, Nicole's blog gained followers. She wrote about the slow erosion of her independence, about the financial control that started small and grew, about the isolation from friends and family, about her mother who never stopped believing in her. "I want to write about you, Mom," she told me one day, "about how you helped me see what was really happening, about the 2 months we spent gathering evidence. Is that okay? It's your story to tell, baby. Tell it however you need to. The blog post about me went viral. Women commented by the hundreds, sharing their own stories about mothers, sisters, friends who'd helped them escape. About the importance of having someone who believes you when you say something is wrong. A publisher reached out asking if Nicole would consider writing a book. "I can't do it without you, Mom," she said. "This is our story, not just mine. Will you help me write it?" We spent the next year working on the book together. Nicole wrote about her experience from inside the marriage. I wrote about watching from outside, seeing the signs, making the difficult choice to involve the FBI. The book was published on a crisp October morning, exactly 6 years after that day in the courtroom. We did a reading at a bookstore in downtown Chicago, and the room was packed. Women of all ages, some with their mothers, some with their daughters, some alone. "This book is dedicated to every woman who's ever felt trapped," Nicole read from the introduction, "and to every mother who refused to let her daughter disappear. To my mom, Teresa Ferguson, who taught me that strength isn't never falling down. It's getting back up, even when you think you can't. Especially when you think you can't." After the reading, women lined up to have their books signed. One young woman, probably in her mid-20s, came up to us with tears in her eyes. "My boyfriend controls all our money," she whispered. "He says it's because I'm bad with finances. But reading your story, I realized it's not about the money. It's about control. I'm going to leave him. I called my mom yesterday. She's helping me make a plan." Nicole took the woman's hand. "You're going to be okay. It's scary, but you're going to be okay. And your mom is going to be there for you just like mine was for me." Watching that exchange, I felt something settle in my heart. All the fear, all the sleepless nights, all the worry during those 2 months of gathering evidence, it had been worth it. We hadn't just saved Nicole. We'd given hope to countless other women. That evening back at Nicole's house, James made dinner while Nicole and I gave Sophia a bath. My granddaughter splashed and giggled, completely innocent of the darkness her mother had survived. "Gamma," Sophia said, pointing at me with a soapy hand. "Gamma. That's right, sweet girl. I'm your Gamma." After Sophia was in bed, the three of us sat in the living room. James put his arm around Nicole and she leaned into him, comfortable and safe. "James, I never thanked you properly," I said, "for being patient with Nicole, for understanding what she needed, for being the kind of man who makes her feel safe instead of scared. Mrs. Ferguson, loving Nicole is the easiest thing I've ever done. She's the strongest person I know, and I think she gets that from you. She gets it from herself," I said. I just reminded her it was there. Later that night, as I was getting ready to drive home, Nicole walked me to my car. The Chicago night was cool, the streets quiet. "Mom, do you ever think about that day in the courtroom, about Judge Wallace reading the letter and laughing?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Why? Because that was the day everything changed. That was the day I took my life back. And it happened because you believed me. Because you helped me. Because you never gave up on me. I'm your mother, baby. Giving up on you was never an option. I know. And when Sophia gets older, I'm going to tell her about you. About her Gamma who fought for her mama, who showed her mama that love doesn't mean accepting abuse. That family doesn't mean tolerating cruelty. That strength sometimes means asking for help. And I'm going to tell her about her mama," I said, "who survived something terrible and came out the other side, who turned her pain into purpose, who helps other women find their own strength." We hugged in the quiet night, mother and daughter survivors both. 7 years after that courtroom day, Richard was still in prison with 5 more years to serve. Constance had moved to Florida, retreating from the scandal that destroyed the Whitmore name. Amber had disappeared from social media, from Chicago, from our lives completely. But Nicole was thriving. Her blog had become a resource for women escaping abuse. Her book was helping thousands of women recognize the signs of financial control. She was promoted to director at her marketing firm. Sophia was growing up in a house filled with love and safety, and 2 parents who treated each other with respect. And me. At 69 years old, I was volunteering full-time at the women's shelter, using our story to help other mothers see the signs, to give them the courage to help their daughters escape. Sometimes people asked me if I regretted the danger, the stress, the 2 months of fear, while Nicole gathered evidence against Richard. I never regretted it. Not for a second. Because that's what mothers do. We fight for our children even when they're grown. We remind them of their strength when they've forgotten. We hold the light when they can't see in the dark. and when necessary, we help them bring down the men who try to destroy them. That wooden chair in the courtroom felt cold beneath me that day, but I sat there with my daughter watching justice unfold, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because love isn't just about nurturing and comfort. Sometimes love is about fighting. Sometimes it's about gathering evidence and calling the FBI. Sometimes it's about refusing to let your child disappear. And that kind of love, that fierce, protective, uncompromising love, that's what saved my daughter's life. That is Teresa Ferguson's story. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these stories about mothers fighting for their daughters' financial abuse in marriage, and the moment when a 64-year-old mother helped expose her son-in-law as a criminal laundering money for drug traffickers. Real question: if you were Teresa, watching your daughter Nicole be controlled and humiliated by her husband Richard and his mother Constance, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them directly? Would you have stayed silent too? Keep the peace? Or would you have done exactly what Teresa did? And spent 2 months helping your daughter gather evidence for the FBI? Tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know a mother who fought for her daughter's freedom, someone who refused to watch their child be diminished by a controlling spouse, someone who spent 2 months secretly gathering evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and organized crime, someone who sat in a courtroom watching a judge read a letter that changed everything. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about mothers who help their daughters escape abusive marriages, daughters who cooperate with the FBI to expose criminals, lawyers who present surprise evidence in divorce court, and what happens when a crops up son-in-law who thought his wife was too weak to fight back discovers she had her mother's strength all along. Thanks for watching. Sometimes the submissive wife sitting quietly in divorce court has been gathering evidence for 2 months. Sometimes a mother's love means calling the FBI and documenting every crime. Sometimes financial control is just the surface of something much darker. And sometimes the most powerful thing a mother and daughter can do is work together to bring down a criminal who thought he was untouchable, watching him get handcuffed in court while his mistress and mother sit in shocked silence. See you in the next video.